So, in my opinion, this model versus entities, it's one of the very important concepts because this is where I was, kind of getting very confused when working with entity framework and trying to massage the data both in MVC and now in Web API. And this concept I was very, very confused with. So I'm really glad that I'm starting to get this basics now of how to work with these object graphs or the objects that retrieve data that is uh, connected. So we'll talk about models versus entities, and obviously we want to control what's being sent to consumers a little more than just using the entities, because if you just use the entities, would just retrieve this data, it just doesn't work. Like, I'll show you an example. So for example, we're going to try to get, let's try to get this get all foods with measures. So I went ahead and changed the method here to get all foods with measures. Try to run it, and we get an error, and it says we have a self-referencing loop. And this is because we have a circular reference. Circular reference means that both of the classes in our food and the measures reference the one another by the ID. So when this serializer tries to go through, it keeps referencing back and forth and sort of creating a never-ending reference. So in order to fix this, we can use link select to decide what belongs inside of the serialized object. So let's try to do that. So in my works with lambda expressions, here we have a link select statement that uses lambda expression of the type, we are passing in the food, but it's not showing here. We're only, because like I was learning, it's only a short way of doing it is just put the F, but we know it's a food is the actual object that is being passed in, food. And now we are starting a new anonymous type. So anonymous type is a type without any name. And then we just assign description and measures of this new anonymous type, and we give it food description and food measures. And since this is now returning anonymous type, we have to change this to object, and let's build and see what happens. So again, exactly the same error, and the error is because we need to do the same thing for the measures. So I added the same thing for the measures with the select for description and the calories, and built and refreshed, and now it's working. However, having all this code here, and we may need this in multiple places, is not a good idea. And also, having this anonymous type is not a good idea. So we can go ahead and build some concrete types to hold our the description and the measures, and then also create a factory that will create these objects for us in one place. So I went ahead and created a food model object that's going to hold our description, and it's going to hold our reference to the measures class, and then measure model is going to have description of calories. So that's how we craft that's what we want to display. And then here I was able to, instead of using an anonymous type, actually put a model, concrete model, and a measure model. And this is way better because now we have a place where it's created. It's not just like something that we create in memory that's prone for the errors. and just to check it's working just fine here. So now, in order not to have this code here and to have one place where this could be created for us, we can create a factory, and we can call it a model factory. So model factory, I created this create method of the type food model that takes in the food, which returns the new food model, the description, and measures. Measures then again selects create, which is we generate a new create method here, and here we return a new measure model, and we say that description is m.description, and that calories are equals m.calories. And now we have a factory that will actually, instead of calling all, making all these statements here, all we have to do is call, this food model create. It will create the main class and a subclass and display it. So let's see how we could do that. So instead of selecting all this here, we're only going to select, so I can get rid of this. I can get rid of this. And then I can just say select, and we just say select model factory, and we send in the food, I believe. No, this is actually wrong. What I need to do first, I need to go ahead and create a reference to our model factory, and we can call it model factory, and we create a new reference here to our model factory, generate a step field for it, and then we use this field to call our create method. Right here, use model factory dot create, and then we pass in the food. Run it and make sure that it's still working really well. But now we have a way simpler and better way of creating this as a factory on the side, just by having this simple model factory create. Another thing that we can do here, for example, if we need to display the data, do anything other with the data or any modifications, for example, if we want to round the calories, we can use math.round in our model factory here, and then here our calories are going to be rounded. Also now, when we need to add another method here to our controller that will get, for example, just one food, we can just use food model get by the ID, because now we want to get the single one by the ID, and we can just say return and we wrap it around this model factory, and we say repository that get all foods ID. So we actually have to change this to integer. We call model factory dot create repository get food by the ID. So now if we build this, and if I go to the here and try to get a food by the ID, for example, of 1, I actually get one food in exactly the same format, which is amazing. I mean, this is amazing stuff. So that's basically a very important part of how to get the data, massage it through these techniques, through the link, and using lambda expressions and using models instead of entities, and even using these factories that can build up the models in a way that we need them for our data display that can be used by our consumers in a certain way.